So welcome everybody. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm Josh Brandwein, a Service Policy Director for NACED. This presentation today is similar to what I gave last month during the committee calls and just serves as another kind of tune-up slash reminder for NACED members who are not only going to be participating in our legislative conference later this month, but also as a refresher for members who are interested in becoming more active in the advocacy space as we move forward this year and in the coming future years as well. And today, unlike last month when I was doing this, we're happy to be joined by Mike Matthews, my counterpart over at NACo. Mike and I love doing these presentations for folks. Never a dull moment, but Mike, if you want to take a moment to introduce yourself before we get started, that would be great.
Yeah, happy to. Good afternoon, everyone. Mike Matthews, Legislative Director here at NACo for Community Economic and Workforce Development. So not only our housing work, but job training and workforce development, in addition to our economic development work. And love the partnership between NACED and NACo. Um, always happy to be here and be helpful any way I can be.
Thank you, Mike. So for folks on the call, if I feel like we have some time set aside for questions at the end, but if anything pressing or you have an immediate question, you don't want to forget it, please feel free to go ahead and ask. Happy to answer some questions on the fly as well. Starting us off here, and this is going to tackle both the legislative side of the House as well as towards the end the regulatory side as well, but just to get an overall feel of how to best approach your role as an advocate when it comes to communicating association priorities to either members directly, members of Congress, or communicating our priorities to the members' staff on Capitol Hill. And also keep in mind, this could be either a meeting where you're having a conversation about our priorities with Washington, D.C. staff of the member office or in their district office or regional office for either a representative or senator as well. So let's say you're ready to go, you're ready to have a meeting with an office. This is kind of the list that I put together as far as prepping yourself and following through with a meeting when you want to have an interaction with with an office on Capitol Hill, whether it be the Senate or the House side. And what you want to start off by asking yourself is, identifying, of course, which member or members that you would like to meet with, and also keep in mind counties. You can have a couple of districts, a couple different representative offices that you may be used to dealing with, or just one. And then, of course, everybody is going to have two senators per state. So identifying the member offices in which you will be meeting with, and after doing so, creating an ask. This is really important when you are charting your progress into meeting with these congressional offices. It is always good to go in there with some kind of ask. So a lot of the meetings that I have been involved with in NACED throughout my time here, for example, are regarding appropriation asks. So asking for a specific federal program to be funded at a specific amount that would qualify as an ask. Now there could be other examples where you're having meetings with a congressional office where you're going in there with a specific question about something going on in your district, something of that nature, but you always want to be going in and speaking to these offices with a direct ask to communicate to, and also helpful to get the feedback from the office itself on what their thoughts are on whatever ask you're going in with. So next, you want to go ahead and schedule a meeting with that office. So I also want to take this opportunity to let everybody know who's on the call, and I always say this to our members, definitely use me as a resource when it comes to scheduling. And of course, I'm also happy to have prep meetings with everybody and making sure that everybody is comfortable to be having these meetings. That's what I'm here for. That's what I'm here, and that's why That's what I enjoy doing the most, really, within my work with NACED. And so when it comes to scheduling meetings, happy to do that for you. You can go through a staff assistant, a scheduler. Depends a little bit office to office, but I'm happy to take care of the scheduling, whether that's when you're here in person during the legislative conference or whether you're here in person throughout the year and you would like to have a meeting with a congressional office, or if it's a virtual meeting, happy to take care of all that as well. And then after all of that has been identified, you have your meeting scheduled, you want to start prepping in anticipation for the meeting. And this goes back to what is going to be your direct ask. It also gives you an opportunity to prep on talking points that NACED as an association likes to speak to when it comes to meeting with congressional offices, such as, for example, what are our appropriation asks for that given fiscal year for the community development block grant or the home program, and being familiar with, what are you going to be going in there and talking to, or if, for example, let's say you're going in there to talk about increased CDBG federal funding, and there is a specific project within your county that has used CDBG dollars to facilitate its development and completion, and you have direct examples and photos of that project. This gives you the opportunity to collect all of that material so that you have that on hand when you go in and meet with these offices to directly have documents to speak to. And I highly recommend that folks do that. It's always great to go in there with more than less. And when you have exact photos to speak to and to show these whether it's a member of Congress or their staff, that is always extremely helpful. Then you have the meeting. Well, again, whether that's virtual or in person, generally meetings go for, I would say, between anywhere in 20 to 30-minute range. That of course, varies greatly depending on what you're going in there and talking about. Generally, you're going to be meeting with one person. We'll get into exactly who you may be meeting with on the next slide, but anywhere between 1 to 2 people, generally from the congressional office side, is who you're going to be meeting with. And then following up and maintaining your relationship with your congressional offices is extremely important. It's great to be able to establish your connection. Like, let's say you have never had a meeting with your congressional office before, this is your first meeting. That's great, but also to follow up with the office after you have met with them. Depending on what you're talking about, they may ask you directly for further, okay, what are some other project examples with home funding that you can show us from your county, that we can show the congresswoman of what's going on in her district. There may be some items that the congressional office asks you to provide them in the follow-up period after your meeting. And then, of course, maintaining your relationship with that office as well is extremely important, because a lot of these folks are up there for quite a long time. I don't think I have to tell many people on this call that, congressmen, congresswomen, senators, they can be up there for 2 or 6 years, or they could be up there for 20 or 40 years. So it's always important to maintain your relationship with these offices after you follow up after your initial meeting. So I wanted to take a look at what an office structure is. Mike, did you want to say anything?
Yeah, can you just go back for a second?
Yeah, sure.
I know it's important to always have an ask. I think, given the political environment we're in today, dealing with, the constant talks of budget reconciliation and funding cuts and streamlining efficiencies, I think one of the best asks, especially in a new Congress, is less so of an ask and more so demonstrating the effectiveness of the programs that you guys implement.
Mhm.
So even if it's, especially if it's a new office, really just, the ask being more educational, right? Just going in saying, this is the county's role. This is why we play this critically important function. Really like talking up the program in a sense of why they should look elsewhere for cuts, and really being armed, talking about the prep, really being armed with real life examples. Like have specific projects in mind that you can show them pictures of, whether it's, families, press releases, the building renderings if it's not built yet, whatever it is, really humanizing it. Because, like Josh said, you're going to be talking to people in DC who could be hundreds or thousands of miles away from you and may have never been to the district before in their life. So you really want to show that like the work you guys do and these funds flowing from DC really do have direct impact within their district. And then show that community support that it has, really making it hard for them to cut these programs, knowing that they're going to face, backlash within the community or really cutting against, the fact that this has housed X amount of people. It brought X amount of money back into the community through private sector investments or whatever that looks like, really just showing and demonstrating that value that these programs have locally within the community and kind of cutting through some of the national, political talking points and arguments. That's all I just wanted to throw out. And Josh, maintaining, I think is critically important. I know I've said this to you guys in the past and I say it all the time, but when I was on the Hill, right, like I had 12 or 14 different issue areas. So it really, a lot of Hill offices really rely on, specific people within the community, whether it's lobbyists or people implementing the programs, whoever that is. Like I had a Rolodex of like 4 or 5 people per issue area. So if something housing related came up, I would go to those 4 or 5 people and be like, hey, what's your thoughts on this? And I still do this to this day within our membership and things like that, but you really have the opportunity to bend the ear and help set the policy within that specific office by using your expertise. So really creating those relationships and building that bond and connection within the community and the district really does go a long way. So I just wanted to flag that, Josh.
Yeah, no, all excellent points, all excellent points. And yeah, definitely being able to communicate the effectiveness of a program back at home is certainly important when meeting with these offices. So all good points, Mike. So yeah, I just wanted to take a look at what the general construct of a congressional office looks like. This is not by any means what every single congressional office is going to look like, but I just wanted to give a quick snapshot for folks as to what an office has as far as its positions and employees that are working within that office for a member of Congress. It's really just top down. You have the member and then the chief of staff and scheduler. The scheduler, of course, self-explanatory, manages everybody's time. The left side of this chart, I feel like we're going to be dealing with less as far as communications, press secretary, and press assistant. The exception there would be, let's say you have a ribbon cutting ceremony or something like that going on. You may have some involvement with the press shop because that will be a press opportunity for the member and having a connection with them. Going down on the right side, starting with the legislative director, legislative assistant, legislative correspondent, and then staff assistant. Generally, at least in my experience for NACED meetings, we have our meetings with either a legislative assistant or legislative director. I know last year, for example, Anoka County had the opportunity to go to a coffee with the senator, with Senator Amy Klobuchar. So, and always we are looking out for opportunities to have meetings with directly with a either senator or representative, but generally, you will be having a meeting with either the LD, legislative assistant, or sometimes legislative correspondent. Very, very, like, I don't think I've ever had a meeting with a staff assistant. Maybe that does maybe happen, but not generally, at least in my experience. So I think the one thing to keep in mind, though, on whoever you are meeting with, they are involved in the issue portfolio. Kind of goes back to what Mike was saying. Like these folks do have a lot on their plate. And don't be surprised if who you're meeting with is somebody who's, in their 20s, because that is really Capitol Hill is fueled by very young, on the younger side staff. But they are all very passionate about the issue portfolios in which they work with. They are always there to listen and have a conversation with you on what you are going in there to ask them about, and they all communicate and relay that back up the chain that goes to the member themselves of that office. So just wanted to give a quick snapshot here. Mike?
Yeah, just two quick things. One, never assume, going back to kind of what I said earlier, never assume they know the level of nuance that you guys know when you're talking about a project. So, a good staffer will start with that and say like, can you walk me through? But really start like 30,000 foot and work your way into it. Just so, they don't automatically shut down, or because I've had meetings where you could tell the staffer might not have known exactly what you were talking about, but pride got in the way, right? And they didn't want to they pretended they knew, and it wasn't a productive meeting. So really just, walk them through the program, the project, whatever you're there meeting with them, and ask questions to kind of gauge where they're at and then work from there. The other thing I wanted to also mention within the congressional office structure is, you know, for advocacy and policy specific meetings, it will be this part of the tree, the congressional DC office staff, but another contingent of a member's office that you guys probably will meet with a little less frequently, but still fairly frequently, is the district office, which is a similar structure. There's a district director and then community liaison officers who deal with like the casework and that kind of stuff. But if you're having specific problems within, CDBG, you can go to the district office and say like, hey, these are the issues we're having with HUD. Can you reach out to HUD, especially when, there's the trifecta within government. So say you're having a problem with, within CDBG, whether it's reporting or whatever, you could go to the district office and be like, hey, can you reach out to your contact at HUD? We're having this issue we need resolved. So one way for you guys to reach out to them, but also, one of the most effective kind of advocacy meetings is kind of more of a soft power approach, and it's really doing invites for roundtables or specific tours within project sites and things like that. So like invite your member of Congress or the district office to tour that CDBG or home project. Again, really getting at the touching feeling, the senses of the project so they can better understand the impact it has within the community.
Yeah, and if folks have any questions about offices back at home, feel free to reach out. As far as getting in touch with who you need to get in touch with, if you would like to meet with a district office or regional office. So moving over into the current makeup of Congress, so this is kind of also doubles as a legislative update in a way, but yeah, we're looking at a very slim majority in both the House, in the House and the Senate. Republicans did increase their majority. I just wanted to paint a picture as to what the makeup is and kind of set the stage as to what the reality is as far as what's in play in both chambers of Congress when we're going in there and speaking to our priorities. And I wanted to just remind everybody that the House with with such a slim majority, you are really talking about very little room for error. This is going to be quite an interesting slate this year when you're talking about what's going to be included in bills, what's going to be moved on the floor. The Republicans are not going to be able to afford to lose really many votes at all. And that is going to create a little bit of opportunity for ourselves to see what initiatives we can get included in any kind of legislation that does get drawn up and brought to the floor by the majority. In the Senate, the Republicans do have a little bit more of some room for error there with their new increased majority after the elections last year. But again, it all plays into how is this Republican trifecta going to operate moving forward with Donald Trump back in the White House as well.
Yeah.
And then,
Oh,
yeah, Mike.
can you go back? I was just going to say a couple points here. One, this three-seat majority is going to continue to shrink. There's a few people still who are members of Congress that have yet to resign that are going to be appointed potentially to or nominated. They were nominated for Senate confirmed positions who haven't had their hearings and votes yet, so they're still members of Congress. I know Ellie Stefanik is one of them of New York, who is going to be the UN ambassador or the US ambassador to the UN. And I believe Mike Waltz is also still a member of Congress, who was appointed to be, I believe, DNI director of DNI, which is the director of national intelligence. So that's going to even shrink further until March or April when the first, I believe, for the two seats in Florida, Matt Gaetz and Mike Waltz will be in late March, early April. So at least for the next few months, it's going to be a very slim majority. The other thing I wanted to flag really quickly too, kind of with an overtone of advocacy, is the amount of new members of Congress this year, and again, using that as an opportunity to really sway a large contingent of Congress on these issues. The House alone has 60 new members, and I believe at least two or three of them were county elected officials, more were local elected within municipalities and things like that. So really getting them to become champions, strong and active champions on these issues. And then there's 10 new senators on the Senate side, one being former county executive of Prince George's County, Maryland. So, really trying to elevate the advocacy work of formerly local elected officials within Congress. I want to say 25 or 30% of Congress in general are former local elected. So, really tapping into that knowledge and expertise at the federal level as we talk about new policies and protecting current policies.
Yeah, that was a really good point, Mike, about how many new folks are going to be coming into this Congress, which again goes back to familiarizing these members and their staff as to what's going on back in your districts as well, because being brand new to their offices, the more the better as far as information that you can go in there and communicate with them on. So yeah, so I just wanted to go through a couple slides here and speak on the majority and the minority leadership constructs in both the Senate and the House of Representatives. So for those of you familiar with the majority leadership in the House, this is not going to be looking any different to you. For those of you who are not, so Speaker Johnson, Majority Leader Scalise, and Majority Whip Emmer all remain in place from their posts that they had at the end of the 118th Congress. And then we do have a switch over in the Senate, being that the Republicans gained the majority after last year's elections. So Senator John Thune moves in as majority leader, senator from South Dakota there, and then Senator John Barrasso of Wyoming comes in as majority whip. This is a big change in that you had longtime Republican leader Mitch McConnell step down from his leadership post at the end of last Congress. That's going to be interesting to see how this plays out. It's been a very long time. I don't know, Mike, how long has it been? It's been probably 20, 30 years.
Yeah, yeah, I mean, easily.
He's been around for a while. So it'll be interesting to see how Senator Thune directs the new Republican majority and their increased majority with their extra seats going into this year, and how the relationship is going to play between Majority Leader Thune, Speaker Johnson, and of course President Trump in the White House, and how they are going to steer the ship as far as their party's priorities in getting bills passed moving forward this year in the first session of the 119th Congress. And I know we have a lot going on right now with the budget, but anything else to add here, Mike?
No, not really.
No. Okay. And then over in the minority side of the house here, so long time, well, kind of long time since the retirement of former Senator Harry Reid. Senator Chuck Schumer, Democrat of New York, goes over to be the minority leader for Democrats in the Senate. He is joined by longtime minority whip Dick Durbin, Senator of Illinois. Nothing changes there. Nothing also is a change over on the House side. Democrats remain in the minority with House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries, Representative of New York, joined by Representative Catherine Clark, Democrat of Massachusetts, as the House Minority Whip. It's going to be interesting to see how the Democrats play a role in what moves through the House of Representatives, given the slim majority held right now by Republicans. There's a chance that they may need Democratic votes, for example, to keep a continuing resolution alive to pass that to keep the government open, or any kind of budget resolutions that may be objected to by the more conservative wing of the Republican Congress in the House. So there may come an opportunity for Democrats in the House of Representatives to play some sort of role in what's going to end up getting passed over in the lower chamber. I would say Democrats in the Senate, less so, given the larger majority that Republicans enjoy in the upper chamber, but still something to keep an eye on moving forward.
Yeah, Josh, the only thing I would add there is, unlike with the Republican Party, especially in the House, Democrats are still grappling with the old guard, still being quite active in the background
Yeah,
of Nancy Pelosi, Steny Hoyer, and Jim Clyburn. So, another kind of dynamic to stay on top of and be on the lookout for. They're sometimes saying they're staying out of the way, but they still have very strong connections and powerful voices in Congress. So, just a slightly different power dynamic within the Democratic Party than the Republican Party to keep an eye on.
excellent point. Yes. So I also wanted to go through some key committees here for folks to keep in mind, and these are all committees that are going to be covering priorities that we as an association care about. So starting over in the House, we have the Appropriations Committee, the Appropriations, Transportation, Housing, and Urban Development, THUD Subcommittee. These committees are given the jurisdiction of appropriation numbers for homes, CDBG. So these are going to be committees that we are definitely going to be track of, having meetings with, being meetings with members of these, both the full committee and the THUD subcommittee. And then also something new that, at least in my time with NACED, that we have not spent as much time meeting with, would be the Ways and Means Committee, which has jurisdiction over in the House side for all tax policy. So tax policy this year is going to be a very large issue. It is because of the expiration, the sunsetting of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017 that was passed into law under the first Trump administration, is set to expire at the end of this year. And the Republican majority in Congress, as well as President Trump, wants to revisit that and extend and revisit what kind of tax bill can be passed this year to expand on what were able to get passed in 2017. This is going to be a very large tax package, a very large bill. There's going to be a lot that is expected to be included in this bill, one of which would be a boost for low-income housing tax credits, for example. That is all going to be focused on members from the Ways and Means Committee over in the House. So just wanted to flag that for folks as something a little bit different this year than what we've been dealing with in previous years.
Yeah, I was just going to flag a few things that, NACo's tracking specifically within the tax bill before we move on. It sounds like there's going to be a resurgence of opportunity zones, so I imagine they're going to get extended and modified a little bit. One of the big things that came out of that was about 68% of all opportunity zone investments went towards multifamily development. So really hitting on that and ensuring that continues moving forward within the tax bill, making sure that opportunity zone investments can be braided more effectively with home CDBG and LIHTC and some other funding streams. Few other things that we're watching are obviously, like Josh mentioned, LIHTC, the permanent extension of the new markets tax credit, which will expire at the end of this calendar year. And then the last thing, looking at the menu of options that the Republicans floated to cut to lower costs. One of them was ending the tax preferences for private activity bonds. So they're, a massive way for local governments to raise revenue, especially for some of these more capital intensive projects. So that's definitely another thing that we've been watching as well and talking with Ways and Means about.
Yeah, and I think that also brings up a good point, Mike, in that there's going to be a lot of areas that Republicans, I feel like more so in the House, are going to be looking to cut. There's been a lot floated, a little bit of a laundry list. So, of course, it'll be interesting to see what comes out there. And depending on what they propose to cut from the federal budget, of course, we will be extremely active on the advocacy front for those programs. Then moving over to the Senate side, so a little bit larger of a list here. So we have the Mike.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, can you go back one slide?
Yeah.
We left off the Financial Services Committee, which
Oh, right.
oversees
Yep.
housing and insurance in the House. The ranking member, obviously, longstanding Democrat Maxine Waters out of California. And then on the Republican side is French Hill, who's chairing the committee. And I'm blanking on the subcommittee chair right now, but the subcommittee ranking member is Emmanuel Cleaver. And then Josh, who I'm blanking on the subcommittee chair right now.
I don't know off the top of my head. I would do a quick Politico Pro search, but I don't, I can't. I'm sharing my screen right now.
But either way, so we talked about the appropriators, and then the Ways and Means is the tax, and then obviously House Financial Services is the authorizer. So any changes to CDBG, home, or any of federal housing programs will have to go through the House Financial Services Committee. I will say French Hill isn't the biggest housing guy, self-proclaimed housing guy. His background is much more in the securities field, so much more financial service heavy. Thinking Wall Street, crypto, that kind of stuff is definitely their main focus. But he has, you know, explicitly said the housing crisis needs to be addressed this Congress. So they will have a focus on it. I imagine a lot of it initially will be kind of oversight and, the general theming of the administration so far. Um, but just definitely something to watch. And I think they're going to be taking a lot of their cues from the Senate side, which Josh is about to get into now.
Yes. So the Senate, uh, pretty big slate here. So just similar to the House, we had the Appropriations Committee, the T-HUD subcommittee as well. All of these, there has been a little bit of change with Republicans coming into the majority. Banking, so the banking committee here, that's going to be a lot of housing bills. So for example, home reauthorization, stuff like that. That it's going to be interesting to see what comes out of the banking committee with new chairman, Senator Tim Scott of South Carolina. I know one thing that is going to be a high priority for me over the next couple of weeks leading up to the legislative conference is Senator Scott in the last Congress proposed the Road to Housing Act. Mike and I had the opportunity to meet with Senate Banking Committee staff a couple of weeks ago, and they're going to be using that language as a little bit of a platform as to how what issues the Banking Committee is going to be getting more involved in moving forward. Some more to come on that. And then also the Housing, Transportation, and Community Development Subcommittee. Senator Katie Britt, I've actually had some meetings with her office, and they are pretty responsive to housing, community development concerns. So it'll be interesting to see how they function moving forward. And then similar to the Ways and Means Committee for the House, the Finance Committee over in the Senate is a committee that we have not necessarily had the opportunity to meet with as much over the last couple of years, but keeping in mind that tax policy is going to be a high priority for Congress, that would fall within the jurisdiction of the Finance Committee. So that is why they're marked on this list as well. All right. So we have all the committees, everything set up here. So let's get into the the fiscal year 25 appropriation requests. A lot of these might seem familiar for folks. I talk a lot about these on our calls, committee calls, all member calls. But as a little bit of a refresher, looking at both CDBG and home. So our fiscal year 2025 request for CDBG was 4.2 billion. Home is 2.1 billion. I think one thing to keep in mind, and this should jump out to you right away when you're looking at all of these funding levels, CDBG is even 3.3 billion throughout FY24, FY25. there's a lot of bipartisan support behind the CDBG program, at least up to this point, there has been. It is the home program where we see the biggest difference between proposed funding levels. If you just take a look at the FY25 proposed levels between the Senate and the House, the Senate, keep in mind these are levels that came out last year when the Senate was still under a Democratic majority. So they landed on 1.425 billion, whereas the House, which of course during last Congress was under Republican control, $500 million is a huge gap there with the home program. Our request right now is 2.1 billion, and the FY24 level is 1.25 billion. So we of course want at the very least for the home program to be to have sustained funding, 1.25 billion at minimum, and we do not want to see that $500 million level come to fruition. The main concern there held by Republicans in the House, and at least from the conversations I've had with those offices and the justification that they use as to how they came up with the $500 million number for FY25 for home, is unused home ARP funding and unspent dollars out of the home ARP program. That is what they have been saying in the meetings that I've been a part of. And that's even though the home ARP program is different from the base home program, that is the reasoning that they're using to float the $500 million proposal for FY25 for home. But now we are in the midst of both chambers trying to cobble together some bills for FY25 with the continuing resolutions set to expire on March 14th, which is coming up here within the next month. So it'll be interesting to see where they land on these programs for FY25. And then even beyond that, where we're looking at with the full Republican majority in Congress as to where these programs are for FY26 levels as well. And just as a quick reminder, and I'll let Mike weigh in here on his thoughts for appropriations, is the FY26 requests, we will have those finalized fairly soon, hopefully before the legislative conference, and I'll of course communicate that to our members as to what our official FY26 request will be for CDBG and home. Anything to add there, Mike?
No, not really. Just, more so this year than other years in the past, it's going to be much more defensive. So really just hammering home why, we need to protect the little funding that we already get for these programs. Uh, they're largely going to fall victim to the larger argument of, government efficiency and cutting federal spending. So really kind of leveraging the current housing crisis and the federal role needed with especially on the supply side, but just much more defensive this year.
Totally agree. So just to expand a little bit on the legislative side of things, so opportunities, Mike earlier mentioned the new market tax credits extension. So the Affordable Housing Credit Improvement Act is a bipartisan bill that actually had some provisions taken out of it last Congress and included it in a larger tax package that ended up passing the House, but unfortunately was unable to pass in the Senate. This includes the LIHTC boost. And also always looking for opportunities to reauthorize both CDBG and home. But I will say there is a little bit of concern as to, I know at least with the CDBG coalition, as to whether or not how heavily us and our allies want to revisit the reauthorization, at least right now. I think there's a little bit of concern that revisiting reauthorization is going to open up the doors for decreased funding. It's going to kind of highlight these programs, and they don't necessarily want to shine a spotlight that bright on these programs to open up the door for possible funding cuts. But I do know that CDBG reauthorization, at least early in 2024, was being floated by the offices of Senator Mike Rounds and Tina Smith, specifically for CDBG reauthorization. And then last Congress, Senator Catherine Cortez Masto of Nevada introduced a home reauthorization bill as well that NACED supported. and NACo supported. So any opportunities that do arise for reauthorization, of course, we will be involved in and supportive of and communicate with those offices. But just a couple other opportunities here to keep track of. And with the LIHTC boost in the AHCIA and the new market tax credits extension, what I was mentioning earlier, the large tax package that is expected to be introduced at some point this year for the expiring Trump tax cuts bill. These are very much in play for that conversation, and it'll be very interesting to see the timeline as to how that tax bill moves forward. It's expected to be a huge bill, and there's going to be a little bit of differences, I imagine, that are going to have to be reconciled even within the Republican majorities with both the Senate, the House, and then, of course, what does President Trump want to see in that bill? So we'll see. It's a little bit of a wait and see approach at this point, but I expect, especially when government funding is finalized and settled, and they get over that hurdle, that this is that the whole tax policy conversation is going to begin to take steam. So that'll be something definitely to keep track of in the next couple of months as we head into the spring and early summer. So looking ahead, I just wanted to, open it up here for the full slate of the year, going up to the end of the fiscal year in September. So January is behind us. We're now in February. So committees have now started to organize or are organized and are having hearings in both the Senate and the House. Of course, we have our legislative conference coming up here in Washington, D.C. in the next couple of weeks, which of course overlaps with NACo's legislative conference as well. Don't forget about Community Development Month in April. We always like for members to submit success stories and take the opportunity to talk about CDBG and the success of that program throughout the month of April. May through July, this is when you're going to start seeing the presidential budget come out. And I would say probably July, I don't know, it could be June. You'll start to see fiscal year 2026 appropriation bills flow out of both the House and the Senate. That's when we will start to get our first, well, really we'll start to get our first inklings as to where we're headed for CDBG and home FY26 appropriations with the presidential budget. But that won't be really solidified until the actual appropriation bills are coming out of Congress in the summer. And then we have our annual summer recess where Congress is out of session for the entire month of August before coming back into session in September, which is when you have the end of the fiscal year. And that's when you hear government shutdown all the time, making the headlines. But hopefully we don't have to deal with that this year. That would be a nice change of pace. And of course, we have the NACED 2025 annual conference in the middle of the month over in Maricopa County, Arizona, which of course we hope to see folks there as well. That's going to be a great conference. Anything to add? Any FYIs, Mike, from the NACo side?
Uh, no, well, I guess our annual conference in July, it's in the city county of Philadelphia this year. And I know the city county wants to be very involved, especially on the housing work that they're doing. We're potentially doing, a mobile tour or whatever that looks like, just a flag there if you're able to go to Philadelphia. And then if you're in town in February, our legislative conference, the agenda, thanks to I'm happy it's coming together now. It's been quite difficult, as I imagine Josh and Laura has been with planning a conference into a new administration. It's been hard to lock down speakers, but we're starting to get some clarity there, and we have some really good housing related topics. We have the principal deputy assistant secretary confirmed at HUD for CPD to talk about, their priorities. We have the NOAC Metro Finance Lab from Drexel University in Philadelphia. They're speaking about the National Housing Crisis Task Force that they put together, which has leaders from the public and private sector, former HUD secretary involved, a really good group. In addition to a few other topics related to community development and housing. So if you're in town, please join us. The last thing I would flag, Josh, going back one slide, the legislative opportunities. I would also mention advocacy in a different way on the regulatory side. Be prepared to write a lot of comments and requests for information this year. I imagine there's going to be a lot of rollbacks and new regulations, whether it's Davis-Bacon, energy permitting, or permitting in general, environmental regulations that could impact housing both positively and negatively, energy efficiency standards, things like that. Kind of the issues that we wrote on last year, kind of going a step further. So be prepared to lend your expertise in that regard as well, because I think there'll be a myriad of opportunity to do so in that regard as well too. So just wanted to flag that.
Yes. I actually have so that's a good segue, Mike, into this one. So federal agency engagement. I don't know. I don't have the full roster who's on the call right now, but Jaylene, for example, of course, Mike. That as far as interacting with federal agencies, specifically HUD, with comment making, that's something that I really think is a powerful component of NACED as an association, going to what Mike said, and opportunities you'll see a little bit further down below, CDBG, BABA, RFI, home, and so on. These are just a couple of examples of proposed rules that we have had as an association the opportunity to engage in through the federal comment process and really utilize our members' expertise to speak on proposed regulations coming out of HUD. And I really want to just echo my appreciation. I know I get a lot of information out of it myself. I know Mike does, hearing from our members and your expertise when it comes to these programs or proposed changes to these programs. So any opportunities that surface this year, of course, we will be happily taking part in that. And all of that is run through our committees, and any opportunities that surface will be announced during either our housing committee or our community and economic development committee. We always then form a subcommittee out of those committees where we specifically have meetings to review any proposed regs coming out of the agencies and drafting our comments that eventually gets submitted as well. And NACo has partnered with us a couple of times on those efforts. So looking forward to continuing that moving forward. And then also moving back to the top here, regular meetings with CPD officials. I know there's been a little bit of some change as far as staffing with the Office of Community Planning and Development over at HUD, but we look forward and we're in the process of creating new relationships with the CPD office. Look forward to having them participate in both our legislative conference and hopefully our annual conference as well. And with HUD participation in our conferences, I always like to flag the opportunities for folks to, outside of just being in the audience and hearing our friends at HUD speak. It also creates an opportunity for you to have one-on-one chances to speak with them as well, just in a little bit more of an informal setting, so it's not just them speaking to you from a stage or with a microphone in their hands. So we always like to have those opportunities for our members. And then also field office relationships is something that I've had the opportunity to be involved in our annual conference planning. And any questions that folks may have. I know field offices can vary as far as how they're made up. As far as staffing goes, kind of decision making as well, that can vary from field office to field office. So getting any kind of more information sharing about field office engagement is also something that we like to focus on within our membership as well. And then just one, I did want to share, speaking of the CPD office, I do have an organization chart. Let's see here that I have of the CPD office. Give me one moment. I just wanted to give folks a snapshot as to everybody in the CPD office. This is up to date as of February 3rd. And some of these names might look familiar to you all. So we have a new Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary, David Wool. For those of you who may remember, Mary McFadden previously held this post under the previous administration. We have the General Deputy Assistant Secretary, Claudette Fernandez, who will be working under David. who we are currently working with right now as far as having CPD involvement in future NACED engagements. And then flowing underneath them, you have Office of Block Grant Assistance and the Office of Affordable Housing Programs. These two offices with Jenny Sardone and Kim Nash, we have great relationships with. We meet with them throughout the year. Some other names that will probably look familiar. James Heyman, Entitlements Community Division Director there. We had James speak at our annual conference last year in Tulsa, and just wanted to get this out for folks to take a look at. This changes from time to time, especially given the administration switch. There have been a little bit more changes than usual, but just to give folks a snapshot as to the CPD office and who we have direct relationships with over there. Right. Let's see. So NACCED advocacy opportunities. Just wanted to do a quick recap here. You know, being active members of our committees, I can't speak to that enough. Being a member of one of our committees, whether it be, you know, the committees that I assist in developing the content for, Housing Committee and our Community Economic Development Committee, as well as, you know, we have our membership committee, Education Committee. All these committees present opportunities for our members to not only learn more about the association, but learn more about what other members in the association are doing, hear from guest speakers, and have opportunities to participate at a higher level of advocacy. Like I said earlier, for example, comment drafting. Also, our all-member call, that is always an excellent opportunity to be more engaged within the association, our legislative conference, and then, like I said earlier, Community Development Month. Homeownership Month is in June. We always like to spotlight work that our members are doing throughout June as well. And then just to go back to the anthem here of this presentation is Capitol Hill meetings. Just because you're not in DC or you're within close vicinity of traveling to Washington, DC, doesn't mean that you're not able to participate in a Capitol Hill meeting if you so do choose. Virtual, we live in 2025, we're in the future now. We always have the opportunity to join virtually, whether that be Microsoft Teams or Zoom. And I really just want to open up that opportunity for all members who are interested in participating at the advocacy level. You don't have to come to Washington, DC to do so. And then, of course, again, our annual conference, which will be at the middle of September. I believe it's September 9th to the 12th, 9th to the 11th, in Maricopa County, Arizona, just east of Phoenix. So I know we have about 5 minutes left. I saw, excuse me, I saw some commotion in the chat. Let's see here. Does anyone have a template or example of an infographic style handout they've used to share program accomplishments with congressional reps? So, Jaylene, we have our success stories template. I think you've used that before. Was there something else that you were looking for?
Yeah, I was hoping for something, and I'll look online too, but something that showed more, because those are kind of to feature one project.
Right.
I was hoping to talk about a bunch of our different accomplishments on one page. So like number of people that have been able to buy houses, number of houses developed, number, miles of sidewalks, like program-wide accomplishments that we could fit onto one page somehow.
So I don't know. So a quick answer is no, I don't believe we have a template for multiple sets of data or what you were talking about, Jaylene. But with that being said, if you would like to modify our existing success story template, we're open. Like if you want to showcase more projects on just having a one pager, that's fine. I don't want, and I don't know, Laura, if you disagree, I mean, feel free to weigh in. But I think however you want to customize your success story, and if that does mean multiple stories within one, along with data sets to further showcase what you want to talk about, I think that's fine.
Yeah, I just didn't know if anyone else on the call had already done something like that and had something we could use kind of as reference. So if anyone
I
has
will-
that, shout out.
I will say, Josh, this isn't a plug for the realtors, but the realtors have really good one-page resources that have
Okay.
like aggregate data where it's like in your state or your district, this is how many X and this is how many Y. They have really good, sheets that I always look to when I'm formatting, success stories and things
Okay.
like that and how to present data. So just a good place to play around with looking
Cool.
at how they present data. Because I mean, say what you want about the realtors, they're one of the most, effective lobbying groups in DC. So they're doing something right.
Yes. Yes. Okay. Good point, Mike. And then let's see, we have Nicole and then Rita.
Yeah, I just want to say I did a little analysis recently where I looked at all of our home projects. I can't remember how far back I went, but the analysis basically showed that for every dollar of home funds, it actually generates $17 of local construction and like local funding. I can send that to you if you're interested, because it's like, it's real information.
Yeah,
It's
I think
real
that would be
live,
great.
real money.
I think
I
that,
think
yeah.
I was gonna say I think that's great too because it shows more the sliding scale of impact, right? Like I think the national average is like 5 and change. So having any, data sets that show like within your district, it could be 3 times that is really important, especially for some of the, uh, you know, districts around you and things like that.
Yeah, I mean, especially because that's not really something that we focus on, right? Like, we're not trying to leverage more funding necessarily. That's not like our priority. It's definitely helped score higher in our process, but this
I,
is just kind of like natural benefits.
yeah, Josh, I don't know if you have a different experience, but when I talk to Republican offices in Congress, ROI is one of the first questions they ask, whether it's,
Yeah.
community development, economic development. It's
Mm-hmm.
because they see it more as a state and local issue. So the more you can show that you're
Yes.
leveraging much more, a larger multiple of state and local and private dollars compared to the federal investment, I think it's very effective when you're talking to certain offices.
Yep. 100% agree. And then Rita, and then I have a call I have to jump on at 4 o'clock. So Rita, what's up? Oh, I think you're on mute, Rita.
Sorry.
Oh, there you
Hi,
are.
folks. Hi, folks. Sorry, I was just thinking really quick that maybe we're working on a map, like a dashboard map to identify where our current projects are funded and past projects, so that it provides a quick, sharp picture to a particular congressional district. This is what's been funded in your district.
Wow.
So it gives them a quick visual. This is your jurisdiction. This is what's been funded. Just a thought.
So you said you're working on that now, Rita, or you have those?
Yes, we're working with our folks to update. We're working on a dashboard, but at this point it's under works. The map though we do have the geodata so that it can start plotting the project locations.
Oh, wow. Okay, cool.
Yeah, so that we
Well,
can show by
please,
district.
yeah, send me all that, Rita, because that's exactly the kind of information that we would love to utilize during Hill meetings.
Yep.
Cool.
So
All right. Well, thank you all. I have to depart to my next meeting, but thank you all. And for those who will be joining us for our legislative conference, I look forward to seeing you soon. And if not, I look forward to being in touch about advocacy opportunities moving forward. So thank you all. Have a great rest of your day. And I look forward to being in touch very soon. Take care.